And welcome, everyone. You'll have just started coming back into the webinar. I hope you had a nice break, grabbed a coffee or a drink. We've got a great presentation coming ahead of us with Golden Predator. Once again, we encourage you to be in the chat function. If you want to talk to other investors who are like-minded like yourself, we'd love to see you in there. But also, and more importantly, the Q&A section. We'd love to hear your questions. I know that Janet would love to answer your questions. So if you have any right away, if you have any throughout the actual presentation itself, you throw them into there. We're going to be probably about 25 or 30 minutes going over a detailed presentation of what Golden Predator is and what they've been putting together. Then at the end of that, we're going to get to the question period. So we'll be sure to get through as many questions as we can. So please get them in there for yourself. And then finally, Janet Lee Sheriff, you're the CEO of Golden Predator. I'm going to be handing this over to yourself. You just let me know when you want to get over to that question period. I'll come back, but I look forward to hearing what you have to say today.
Thanks, Brandon. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Thank you to the organizers for a really innovative program. And I'm hoping that you'll get some information on us today and continue to follow our story. Golden Predator is solely focused on advancing the Brewery Creek mine back into production. As you'll see on the slide, this is a past producer that operated from 96 to 02, and Golden Predator is keen to reactivate the mine. It's located in Canada's Yukon, and we'll talk a little bit about what we're doing to advance the project. But first, for your own protection, do your own due diligence. I may be making some forward-looking statements. I think Golden Predator gives investors a very clear advantage from a very unique situation. Often when you go to start a mine, you have to go through years of your own due diligence, feasibility studies, and permitting. And we're in a very unique position coming into a past producer with existing quartz mining and water licenses in place for a timely restart, where we have the permits and then we're completing necessary feasibility level studies as required under regulations. So what you see in the Brewery Creek project in Canada's Yukon near Dawson City is a really unique situation with a fully licensed project that has over 1 million leachable gold ounces and over 1 gram per ton in a safe jurisdiction, with existing infrastructure left in place for both a timely restart and a short development time, and a low capex because of the infrastructure left. So we'll walk through what we are doing to maximize that opportunity. As mentioned, we're advancing towards production. We just completed a new mineral resource estimate and was released this fall. And it's we did something quite different on our estimate. We considered leachable ounces as opposed to oxide and sulfide. And it's important because the level of confidence in what will leach increases substantially. This information, with over 1 million ounces, is going into our feasibility study that's underway. And again, we also have some drilling that's underway right now. We're drilling in both the licensed area and in a highly prospective area in the southern part of the project. Our market cap's about 46 million Canadian, 186 million shares fully diluted, 172 issued and outstanding. Myself and my husband are one of the largest individual shareholders, along with Eric Sprott, and just under 10%. And CIBC Wealth out of Toronto's Yorkville office has about 20% collectively, with a series of high net worth investors. We have some other assets in hand. We have the Yukon Mint, which I'll explain. We're making gold coins, incorporating Indigenous art. We hold about $7 million of Seabridge stock from the sale of our Three Aces project. And we are about a 30% holder of Taku Gold, as well as 20% of Group 11, which grew out of our environmental and social obligations that we were meeting and exceeding. Our board of directors is very strong. Full disclosure, I am married to the chair. I report to an independent compensation committee, and we have a very strong mix of investment background, engineering, and operations. Critical to the team is a strong ability to put a mine into production, and to that we have Mike Myslowski as our Chief Operating Officer, who has operated mines for Teck and Coeur across North and South America, and Jim Hesketh, who is a mine builder and operator, and has operated a mine in the Yukon, as well as Montana, California, and Nevada. And importantly, he restarted a heap leach mine in California under very stringent regulatory regime, and brings a strong knowledge of how to do that, as well as a background in Brewery Creek. And what you'll notice with all of our team is everybody had to come in with a strong background of the project so we could move as quickly as possible, given the opportunity that we have. And again, having those licenses in place with the ability to move forward at a time when gold is very promising is extremely important, and capturing those windows of opportunity critical. Golden Predator is committed to our environmental, social, and governance responsibilities. We believe in legal agreements and have a Socio-Economic Accord with the Tr'ondëk Hwëch'in First Nation. But we also believe those are really only the starting place of our work in the community, and we have to work to exceed them at all times. To that, we take a dual path of community engagement, separate to consultation as required under legislation. And it's a means of bringing the entire community with us. And we do very innovative programming with the Yukon Mint, Elders and Residents, our Brewery Creek Bees program. Now we're starting a Brewery Creek History Project to capture the living history of the project through time, of which we're just a chapter. And we also did some really interesting work at Three Aces, building the first processing plant that was chemical free in the Yukon. That now, because we no longer have Three Aces, is ending, but it has resulted in Group 11 Technologies. And Group 11 is a separate private company in the US that is looking at in-place mineral extraction for gold. It's ISL or ISR technology, and we're using experts from the uranium industry in order to advance that for gold. And we're using an environmentally friendly solution. That is a separate asset and something that we're quite proud of being able to participate in, and noting that this is not something that we're using at Brewery Creek. This is something that's testing and will take a number of years. They are using this type of technology in other sectors, and it's a very much more environmentally friendly process. But that aside, we are focused on Brewery Creek. And the photo that you see now is when the mine was in operation from 96 to 02. There's a significant amount of infrastructure left in place. The ponds are still there, the heap, those buildings will be reestablished. And really, it's a very, considering other types of projects and with infrastructure left in place, it's a very short timeline back into production. The project is located, as mentioned, close to Dawson City, about 55 kilometers. You see the Dawson City Airport about halfway, and they do have a paved runway with 737 service. It is in the traditional territory of the Tr'ondëk Hwëch'in First Nation, of which I've mentioned we share a very respectful and open relationship as we move forward together. You'll see that the project butts against First Nation Settlement A and B lands, and it's also close to the Dempster Highway, so lots of infrastructure in place. This is a photo of the heap leach operation. In addition to having year-round access and road access, it's about a 180 square kilometer project, and a portion of that is licensed for 4 million tons a year under the quartz mining license. The green that you see here is the heap leach pad that has been built up, and there's about 9.5 million tons on that. There's 3 cells that are licensed and remain to be built. This is all something that would happen under the development stage. We are looking at reprocessing the material on the heap at present and removing some of that as waste and deleterious materials in order to increase the lifespan of the heap that's already there. It has a 15 million ton capacity. I'm just going to go through what we've been doing on the project, and this is a close-up of the project. The area that you see in beige is the area that is covered under the mining license, and what you see in blue is the heap leach pad. The green are the resources, and there's over 500,000 resources in that licensed area, and there's another about the same amount outside of the licensed area. We are presently drilling inside the licensed area to connect the green pits, and I'm going to try and show you, but it's not going to work, so I'm just going to keep talking. The green pits are where we have expanded a series of separate pits. Now we now call that large area the keg, and we are drilling between Keg and Lucky in the eastern part to try and connect those into one pit shell. This changes the economics a lot and improves it, and will be incorporated into the feasibility study that we anticipate coming out in the first month of 2021. I'm going to let Jeff Carey tell the story of this now that I've sort of given you an introduction. Jeff is our site geologist. He is somebody that's been with the company a long time, and former professor at Fort Lewis. And I think he can give you a very good overview with this introduction. And then I'll come back and speak a little bit more on the project.
I'm Jeff Carey, a project geologist for Golden Predator exploration here at the Brewery Creek project. First time I came to Brewery Creek was 2010 through 2012, and then was back up again last year and took care of the 2019 drilling, and then this year's 2020 drilling. Well, as project geologist, I wear a lot of hats. You know, my main goal is to plan all of the drilling and execute the drilling, oversee the logging, sample shipments. So there was an exploration influx into the Yukon. They came in, staked claims, did additional sampling, started the program in earnest in 1989. By 1996, they had a production decision, and Brewery Creek by that time had moved through, and the operating company was called Loki Gold, and they operated the mine from 1996 to 2002, and they operated in probably one of the tougher periods. It was declining gold prices. By the time they shut down, gold was sub 300 at 275. From 2002 to 2009, there were a couple operators, and in 2009, Golden Predator acquired the property, and in a deal with Alexco Resources. And then 2010, Golden Predator started in earnest with large drilling programs. 2010, over those 3 years, they grew the resource base here fivefold. But then again, kind of a soft market and a decreasing gold price in 2013, and problems with permitting. We knew we had an active permit, but the government didn't feel that way at the time, but we really didn't do any work here from 2013 to 2019. 2019, last year in July, the government came out and said that our permits were active, which allowed us to continue to move forward with the project. And last July and August, we came in and continued to drill, had success, and we've put out 2 new resources since. Right now, the 2020 program, we're looking just to finish up one area where we didn't have high enough drill density to model, and that's what we call the Golden Extension. And that extension should allow us to incorporate the Lucky Zone mineralization into our greater keg resource. And the kegs, it's an interesting concept. The 2019 program was focused on trying to extend mineralization to create a much larger pit instead of smaller single pits, and we've been successful in that. And so the drilling that we'll finish up this year should allow us to move the Golden Pit into the Lucky Pit, and the keg will encompass, I think it's a little over 3 kilometers of strike length. We're located in a highly prospective geologic environment. The area that we sit in here is part of the Foreland Fold and Thrust Belt. And to the north of us is, they call it Cratonal North America. To the south of us is an oceanic basin called the Selwyn Basin. And starting about 140 million years ago, The Selwyn Basin was basically moved, they call it thrusting, and brought up onto the edge of the North American Craton. And it was a series of 3 large thrust faults. That deformation went on from 140 million years to about 90 years. The compression and the stacking of those rocks thickened the crust. And then as you thicken the crust, you allow igneous rocks to form. And then those igneous rocks, as they move up to the surface, they're liquid at depth. And as they come up to the surface, they look for plumbing. And those old thrust faults were the plumbing that they came up into. So those rocks were intruded into the zone and then subsequently fractured again. And those secondary fractures then have fluid that comes up that carries gold and arsenic with it. When it was formed, it was probably 3 kilometers under the surface. And then here we are today. The age of the mineralization is probably 90 million years ballpark, and 90 million years later it's exposed at the surface and we explore for it. The work that we're doing this fall, we've got a diamond rig here with Kluane Drilling out of Whitehorse. And they're doing metallurgical work and geotechnical work. So we're drilling PQ core just to get large volume samples for metallurgy. That rock will head down to Reno, Nevada, to McClellan Labs, where they'll do the final column tests on it, which help us determine the leachability of the rock in our final models. And then we've got another series of geotechnical holes that we will drill that will help us with the engineering, and there'll be water monitor wells, there'll be, and then geotechnical wells where they look at high wall stability. So we'll have monitor wells on both sides of the pit to monitor rock stability and water levels, which allow for engineering. When this RC drilling is finished up, then we'll do a final resource calculation. And then those numbers and data will drive a bankable feasibility, which is in progress right now. And that bankable feasibility, if it's positive, will define how much capital the company needs to raise to initiate the mine, and we will move from there. We're probably going to be pushing 1 million ounces of mineable oxide mineralization, and very few places have a permitted land package where you can come in and it's just a matter of building the mine with capital. I like working for Golden Predator because for me personally, you can dream and think of ideas and targets, but if you don't have management behind you that finds money to drill those targets, you can't test your hypothesis. Golden Predator has been committed to doing that type of work up here, and so it's enjoyable to do.
I just want to thank Jeff for doing that. We sent a video crew up when we started the drill program, and we'll have another one going up when Jeff moves into the southern part of the property. He is presently in an area between what he referred to as the Keg and Lucky, and he's moving down towards Classic and Lone Star before too long, and we'll have another video of that. I do want to mention that extremely important in our ability to move forward has been our relationship with the Tr'ondëk Hwëch'in. And we are where we are today because of their support. And I want to make sure I mention that at this point. A little bit of a close-up on the property. When Jeff was speaking about the Keg, the outline that you see in red is what he refers to as the Keg pit shell now. And the Lucky is what we're trying to bring into that. It's to the east. It's important to bring in Lucky as it is the highest grade pit on the property. The southern part where we're going to be drilling is a different type of mineralization. It's younger, and we have drilled there in the past and made some discoveries. And we're quite excited about going down there and seeing what the size potential of that area would be. It's a bit lower grade. We're over 1 gram per ton in the reserve trend, which is where they are now. But it's lower grade, but it's continuous mineralization until we did about 200 meters depth. Again, just a close-up of where they're drilling right now, as mentioned by Jeff. I'll just keep sliding through these. I just want to show a video just to give you some context. It's important in these videos that you hear all the voices of the company and that you see the project. Now that you've seen some of the topography and the pits that are in place, we're going to walk through this video, which is a flyover of the mineralized zone in the reserve trend, which is licensed. So I'll just let them start the video and then I'll talk through it. So what you're going to see here is it's going to start in the west and look east. You're coming in on the access road. There's a 75-person camp and the heap leach pad that you see there, the ponds in the front. And it's going to fly over the reserve trend. And coming up next, you see the historic resources and the pits that are there. And you'll see an addition of our resources that we've added to the historic. There's about 100,000 ounces left when we took over the project. We did some drilling, next to the heap, called condemnation drilling, and found a resource. So we have an initial resource in what we call the camp zone, and you don't see the heap, which is very close to that. So we'll continue to do some additional drilling there, and that's just a maiden resource. And then we're going to fly over where we drilled in 2019 between the pits in order to combine them, as Jeff mentioned, into one large pit shell. And this becomes important in the modeling for how we would mine the property. So you see everything from Canadian to Golden is now one pit shell. We had hoped to incorporate Lucky. As mentioned, we didn't have enough drill density. So our resource estimate recommended we go in immediately and drill in order to incorporate that last piece into it. So you'll see as you look between Golden and Lucky, there's an area where there doesn't look like there's enough drilling. It'll be circled, and that is where they are just completing their drilling now, in addition to the metallurgical. So this will wrap up, and we already have some core shipped to the labs. We have been advised the labs are slow, so we've got to push on some of the stuff that's important for the feasibility study. We will, in future years, look to connect Bohemian and Schooner, but that is not in the licensed area. And a good segue is that we do have resources identified that aren't in the previously assessed and permitted license. Those will require going through amendment to incorporate them in, and we will start that process fairly quickly. Thank you. I like videos. I get tired of listening to myself, and I'm hoping that they're useful. So our first step in the mine planning is to complete the original mine plan as previously assessed and permitted, and that's in the licensed area. To that end, we have about 450,000 ounces in there. We would look to build up the infrastructure on site following a production decision, and that would be made in the spring by the board, and financing to follow thereafter. It would be a short development timeline. Because of the infrastructure that's left in place, it would take 16 to 18 months to build out the mine. And at the same time, we would be looking to enter the permitting process to expand outside of the licensed area. We have about, and again, this is subject to independent feasibility study, but we're looking at an 8 to 10 year mine life. So that gives us plenty of time to go in and do the permitting to expand, include the ounces that are outside of the licensed area, in addition to continuing to drill it out. We see a lot of exploration potential at Brewery Creek. There's some very good geophysics and geochem in place that's been a guiding factor for us in this. Viceroy, who was the operator before us, did very good work in an exploration plan, but unfortunately ran into gold prices that dipped down to almost $250 US. Their hedge ran out, they had to shut down, and they never were really able to expend the budget on exploration. it left us with a very good starting place, and we've continued to expand it through the trend and into the south. And you'll see from this map that the geochem signature really provides a very good base for where you could look to continue to explore. So right now, focus is down in the classic. That is not something that is part of the feasibility study, and why we've left it to the end of the year. But it is something that gives us a lot of future planning for the project. So this year, we have a few timelines. We've announced our mineral resource estimate. As Jeff mentioned, we will be updating that following the drilling that's underway. We have a 3,000 meter program that's underway, and the metallurgical drill program actually is now finished. We expect to have updates coming from the restart study. We've been doing a series of compression and column tests on the heap to look at stacking and contents. So that will start to come out. We expect the feasibility study to be completed in the first quarter, along with the production decision. Kappes-Cassidy is doing the feasibility study, and Tetra Tech out of Reno is doing all the mine planning. The feasibility study will be include bids for construction, and it will be able to go right into implementation. I get a lot of questions on our production levels and our costs. This will be confirmed in the feasibility study, but I do note that it's about a 75,000 ounce a year producer based on what the mining license is now. We would seek to increase that in the assessment and permitting process, but it's about 75 to 90 is a good estimate for now. All-in costs, we will confirm that in the feasibility study by an independent. There is a PEA in place that can give you some guidance on that. I think if you use $950 for all-in US, it's a good guideline. And there are some other operating mines in the area that you could compare costs to. We will be looking to make a production decision and financing decision in the spring or before the spring. And that would allow us to be able to go in, close the system, reline the ponds, get the ADR plant going. And that would all take place over 16 to 18 months, and then be able to wet the pad and start to process. Other assets, as mentioned, Group 11 and the Yukon Mint, they are things that we've started because of our commitments in the community, and we look forward to continuing them. But Brewery Creek is our focus. And again, I just really feel that there's a unique opportunity here because of the licenses in place and the infrastructure that's left on site to be able to capture this window of opportunity with a rising gold price. And look forward to having you follow our story. And I also look forward to any questions that we have today. We've got lots of time for questions, and I would encourage people to ask anything you like and as many as you want. And if I can't answer them, I'm sure Jeff can. So thank you again.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you, Janet. I know that throughout the day, we've had a little bit of a delay from my camera comes on. So you just let me know when you do see and hear me. But fantastic presentation there. Some great videos as well. I know people really do like to see that because we're visual learners. We like to see, we like to hear. And that's why this platform is really the one we wanted to use for this conference, so they can do that. They can see and hear the leadership in the company, but also see and hear a little bit from the company as well, especially with this presentation. There are quite a few questions here, so why don't we jump right into the first one from Robert. And you can hear me all right, by the way, Janet?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Beautiful. Yes, we're back and good to go.
Excellent.
So the first question here is from Robert, and he asks, initially, completion of the BFS was scheduled for Q4 2020. I see this has now been moved to Q1 2021. Can we be certain it will be completed by then? If all goes well, when will you pour first gold?
That's a really good question, and I thank you, Robert, for the question. Initially, we had planned the feasibility study being completed by the end of this calendar year. When Gustafson completed their mineral resource estimate, they felt that we needed to do some additional drilling in order to bring in the Lucky Pit. This is really important because it changes the economics of the project. They had a second recommendation that we drill in the classic zone down south to look at future and exploration growth. So we made the decision that we would do this. And so it was a very fast program that was planned. The core has already been shipped, but the labs are a bit slow this year, and we're looking at 45 days. So we didn't want to promise that we could complete this by the end of the calendar year, not having any control over the labs and the delays. So we've adjusted that to be able to fulfill. We could have done this and completed the bankable feasibility study without the drilling, but we felt that it was important to incorporate that as well as some additional geotechnical drilling. When would we anticipate production? A production decision would be made by the board following the bankable feasibility study. So that would be, we would anticipate that decision being made in February, March. We have a number of confidentiality agreements in place already. We're seeking primarily debt, but we anticipate some equity financing as well. And that would be in place by the spring. We would then move into a development phase, all things going as planned, which would see us being able to wet the pad and pour gold in 2022. You don't want to start wetting a heap leach field in the fall. You want to make sure everything's operating and you've got a good lead into the spring and summer for that. And then commercial production would follow 6 to 8 months after that.
Absolutely. Appreciate that answer there. The next question is from Mark. What do you think investors miss about the Golden Predator story? Good question.
I'm sorry, what do they miss about the Golden Predator story? Or is there something missing?
I believe if you're ever finding in the sense that this is where I believe Mark is asking, if you're ever talking to investors, is there ever that one element that they miss about your story? They don't see it properly, and then they speak to you and they speak to your management team and they go, "Oh, I didn't know about that." I believe they're asking, is there an element that sometimes investors miss that maybe you can elaborate upon?
Okay. I think the piece that people try to grapple with is the fact that we have existing licenses, but we're still doing analysis to determine our mine plan. And it's a bit backwards because generally you have that mine plan and feasibility study done under regulated requirements in advance of a license. But this is backwards. So I think it's the assumption that you have a license so you could just go in and mine. And that's not how it works, that there's 43-101 regulations to protect investors, that we have to do a feasibility study. We need to do all our proper planning in order to do a restart. There's, as mentioned, geochem and technical information that we need. So I think that's what people miss. And then the value of that license is something that's also incredibly important to our story, that once we have that, we don't need to go into the permitting process. We have those in place. Yes, we need to renew them. Yes, we need to amend them, but we have them in place. And that's a huge cost and time saving.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that. I believe that's what Mark was asking, so I extrapolated it there. Another question from Mark there as well. Could you discuss progress to date, holes drilled, etc., on the RC and Met Core drilling programs? When do you believe it'll wrap up and results be released?
The metallurgical, about 1,000 meters, is done. They're still doing a little bit of geotechnical. They're almost finished in the reserve trend, so between Lucky and Keg. And they'll be moving down into the Classic and Lone Star zone to do a few holes down there. Those will be wrapped up within about 10 days. Some of the core has already shipped to the lab. The rest is going sort of weekly. 45 days is what we're getting as guidance from the labs. We've been hearing from people both in Nevada and Golden Triangle that it's been a little slow. So that would put us towards the end of the year. We would start to be able to put some results out. In the interim, we have some results from previous testing that we've done. We did some testing on the heap last year. So those will start to come out.
Absolutely. Appreciate that. Our next question, we're going to Jessica. Jessica says, well done, Janet, on Golden Predator. It's a great story. Can you tell us more about the importance of year-round road access in your jurisdiction, such as the Yukon?
Thanks, Jessica. I appreciate the feedback and the question. When we decided to go to the Yukon, Golden Predator previously had been in Nevada, we made a decision that we were only going to go after road accessible projects. And the premise from the board was the cost and time to put roads in was prohibitive if you really want to build a mine. If you're doing exploration and you're not anticipating that decision, it's different. The other that we decided was that the best place to find a new mine is at an old mine. And this is a premise that exists in jurisdictions everywhere. And you see it now. Projects that have been sitting idle since the 80s are now starting to come back. And it's all about whether or not you want to move to that mining phase or you want to stay in exploration. So there's tons of projects out there that don't have road access, but we were very selective, and it's extremely important. And it's a huge step forward to build a mine, to have that road.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Our next question is from Robert. He says, what is the AISC?
AISC? I don't know.
No, that's fair. I always thought that.
A question as to where it's coming from, I'd be happy to answer it. I'm not quite sure, though.
No problem. So what we'll do for yourself, Robert, send out an email of that. I always thought that's why you've got every team is made up of a team, and we all have all the different things. To pull it off out of somewhere is kind of hard at times. But we'll go to the next question here, saying, what am I missing is the question. This is a great story, exciting. What is developed and what is coming, but your stock never moves. Why do you think that might be?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And one I do get often. And it's a multi-part answer. The first one is that this junior exploration sector is subject to a lot of hype around drilling this year. And you see a lot of stories that are doing quite well. They announce a financing, they announce drilling, and their stock goes crazy. And then the drill results come in and it goes right back to where it started. So we're not that story. So we don't benefit from the hype around the drilling. We are on a path to build a mine. So it's not that, it's not sizzle, it's steak. And the other is when you're in a feasibility study phase, it's kind of boring because you're not having the exciting drill results or you're not pouring gold. So there's that. The other is I think there's some confidence in the market needed surrounding our licenses. As Jeff mentioned, there were some questions in the past, and we are very confident about our licenses for two reasons. And it's fair for the market to ask. One is that we're confident about renewal of our licenses and our licenses in general because we have the support of the Tr'ondëk Hwëch'in First Nation. And as the people that are directly impacted on the land, this is incredibly important. And we have a relationship that's built on trust and very open information sharing. And the other is that we have a legal opinion on our licenses that it has been prepared by one of the authors of the legislation itself. So we're very confident about that, but I think the market is seeking confidence. Mm-hmm. I've got it. So I hope I've answered the full question. If not, let me know.
No problem. And just for further clarification, and forgive me for just doing the acronym there, It's the all-in sustaining cost of ounces produced. Otherwise, the cash cost for when you will be in production, if you have those numbers on hand by chance.
Oh, thank you, Robert. All in, I'd go to the PEA at this point for some guidance. It will be coming out clearly in the feasibility study, but I'd say 950 US is a good guideline at this time. Sustaining, let's go with 750 at this time.
Gotcha. Thank you. Another question here. Golden Predator always seems to be out in front when it comes to community engagement. Why does this matter, and why do you do stuff like this, as it doesn't seem to move the stock? But is there still that purpose of getting it out there? Like we were talking earlier, you're looking for the steak, not the sizzle. You're looking to really create a system. You're create a company that will be a mine one day. When it comes to that, though, why continue to do all of this? Is that because you continue wanting to get the story out? Is it possibly you feel the obligation to shareholders to constantly reach out to them and update them? I believe that's what this investor is just curious about.
That is a really good question, because when it doesn't impact your stock, you have to question yourself at times as to what is your motive. But I think if you don't engage the community, your stock will will suffer for it, and you put the project at risk. So while the market may not be giving it any value at this point, when the community is supportive and you've achieved your social license, you've de-risked a project. So to me, a social license is as valuable as a water license and a mining license, and you achieve it in a very different way. When I was very fortunate. When I was 26, I moved to the Yukon, and I started working in a community called Ross River, and it was mostly First Nation. And for some reason, the elders liked me, and they decided that they were treating me almost as a gap filler, as their youth were going away and getting educated. And I was given the impression that they did not dislike mining. They just wanted to be involved, and they wanted to see jobs, and they want to see contracts, they want to see business development, and they want to be respected, and they want to be brought along. So I think we have a responsibility, and oftentimes the mining sector just needs to kind of advance a little to bring along the community and to do a better job in not only bringing the community with you, but educating the community and finding ways to incorporate the community. I feel that has resulted in decisions by the First Nation for surrounding Brewery Creek that could not have been achieved any other way. And it just means showing up and being there, really, and treating people with respect.
Absolutely, I agree. Another question here. I believe you touched on this very lightly, but I'll ask the question fully, saying, Brandon, can you please ask Janet what the timeline is on completing the feasibility study?
It'll be finished in Q1 of 2021, and that will also be the timeline for a production decision by the board, and then we'll immediately move into a financing decision. We're hoping for a predominantly debt deal. We have a number of CAs in place, and I think when we originally started, we were sort of bootstrapping ourselves back into production by reprocessing the heap. And in that time period, when we started, gold increased $500 an ounce. And so we looked at doing a more fulsome mine plan and going as well into mining of licensed material. And that changed the feasibility study scope, but it also expanded the interest for financing, because there's not a lot of people that want to finance 30 or 40 million. But when you're looking at a financing of about 80 to 100 million, there's a bigger appetite for that. And that's what we anticipate that we're looking for. Again, the infrastructure that's been left in place is significant and reduces our CapEx to get back into production.
Absolutely. I've got a question here. I found it in our chat actually, so I'm going to ask it. It's a two-part question from Tom. Um, what is your position with reverse split the stock to please institutional investors and list on other exchanges versus allowing the value of the stock slash company to increase organically?
Well, I have 11 million shares and I don't like reverse splits. So there's the first part. Can you repeat the second part, sir?
The first part was essentially, what's your position on the reverse split to please institutional investors to list in other exchanges to get that dollar amount so that you can get onto another exchange versus the allowing the value of the stock of the company to increase organically?
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of reverse splits. So I'd prefer organic growth, to
Gotcha.
be,
Well,
to be
you
honest.
immediately got a thank you from that investor with a smiley face, actually. So immediate gratification for your opinion. We have another one here. I'm just trying to get my place again because I skipped to go over the chat room there. When do you envision going into development? The same question for production.
Development would be next year. So you would start, the first things you would do is reline the ponds, close the system, and then build the ADR plant. Relining the ponds you want to do in the spring, summer, and the ADR plant is actually about a 12-week lead time, bigger ticket item in the planning. But that could extend into the winter. So that would put you at looking at wetting the pad, pouring gold, not commercial production, in June 22.
Gotcha. Thank you. We have another question from Mark here. Can you elaborate on the ability to permit new areas with known resources and develop new resources through exploration?
Okay, I'll take the second part first.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of exploration targets across the Brewery Creek property. We have focused solely to this point, except now we're going back into classic for the past 2 years in the licensed area because of a restart. And it's not very exciting. You know, the market doesn't get too jazzed up about infill drilling. It doesn't do much to your numbers. But you need to do it to build a mine. So to that, we're also doing exploration down in the southern part, Classic and Lone Star. And that's a very different system than we see in the licensed area of the reserve trend. There's a lot of targets. We've got a geophysicist looking at them as well as our geologists, and they're picking a few places. In future years, we'll go back there as well. We also can continue to the east. There hasn't been a lot in sort of the Bohemian Schooner area. The first part of the question was, could you repeat just for the audience?
Yes, the first part of the question was, can you elaborate on the ability to permit new areas with known resources?
So Brewery Creek's a little history lesson here. It was the first mining license ever issued by the Yukon government, and that's why its number is 001. It also has the longest running Socio-Economic Accord in the Yukon. Viceroy was very progressive and established one in '86. And the community had a great deal of input into the licensing process, which was done under, it's called CIA, which is the Canadian assessment process. Since then, the Yukon has its own assessment process. So any amendments to our license would be required to go through the Yukon process. But because it's an existing mine, it's on a short track. So it's not a new mine. If it was, it would go through what's called executive committee, which is very lengthy. But because it has so much historical information, it would be on a short path. 18 to 24 months is what they say, but we would err on the side of caution and say 3 years. But that's 3 years from when we start at any time. So, we've got lots of time before we need to go into those additional resource areas.
Absolutely. And then we'll come to our last question for today. We've gone through a lot of them. This is from Robert once again. He says, thank you for taking the time to answer our questions, Janet. Last question, which is ironic. It is the last question, or coincidental, I should say. Do you expect to have to go back to the market to raise further cash between now and completion of the BFS?
Right now, we have about $8 million in cash and equivalents. And that means we have Seabridge stock and we have Taku Gold stock plus cash. We recently did a small private placement to expand the holdings of an existing shareholder and pay for the drill program that we're doing now without having to sell our Seabridge stock. The Seabridge stock has doubled in value since we made the transaction for 3 Aces. And we have our investment committee is undertaking an option writing strategy on the stock, and we're making money on it. So selling it was not considered a good strategy. And so they can watch, anybody can watch in our financial statements to look at the performance of the option writing strategy, but it gives us hard dollars to utilize instead of liquidating the stock. Because we do have confidence in both Taku and Seabridge, and don't wish to part with that right now. So,
no, very fair. Well, Jen, I appreciate very much you taking the time to go through all of this, your presentation, the videos that you were able to play, and what felt like potentially even like a dozen plus questions from investors. So I appreciate that very much. Lastly, if anybody wants to know more about you, your company, where are they reaching out to? What is the contact information?
We can be reached at goldenpredator.com. Info@ is our email, or you can go online and get the office information there. I would welcome any questions. It takes a team of very diverse skills to build a mine. And I think we have an amazing team that's put together that's working extremely hard to push as fast as we can. So I welcome any feedback or comments and appreciate everybody's time today. And thank you, Brandon, and everybody for this wonderful format.
Absolutely. And just very quickly for a little bit of clarification, info at goldenpredator.com.
That's correct. Yes.
For the email. Perfect.
Yes.
Well, thank you once again. And thank you for everybody who's tuning in or watching this after the fact. For those who are here live, we'll be going to our next webinar in just a moment. So we've got another great company coming up here. But Janet, thank you for your time. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day as well.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. Have a great day.
Take care now.